Hi there, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's APMG webinar. I'm Mark Constable. I'll be your host and moderator for the session, and I'm joined by a regular guest presenter, Melanie Franklin. I'm sure we have a few attendees from previous webinars delivered by Melanie, who'll be familiar with the background, but very quickly, for the benefit of those that aren't, Melanie's an experienced practitioner, trainer and consultant in all things Agile and project, program and change management. And alongside running her own Agile change management training and consultancy business, Melanie's also co-chair for the UK chapter of the Change Management Institute, so particularly relevant to today's session, which is about sharing the value of what effective change management brings to organisations, as despite recognition for change management as a profession continuing to grow, it's still undervalued or not sufficiently understood in many organisations. So we'll try and address some of those problems today. And before I hand things over to Melanie, bear with me while I cover a little housekeeping. So first point is we are recording the session as we do with all our webinars, and having registered, you'll receive a follow-up email once we've got the recording and a copy of the slides online. Secondly, you're welcome to submit any questions at any point throughout the session. So you should see an option on your GoToWebinar control panel where you can type in your questions. I'll be closely monitoring that throughout, and we'll try and address as many as we can towards the end. But we've got a lot of folks on here today, so we might not be able to get to every question, but we'll do what we can. Last but not least on there is feedback is very welcome. So from reminder emails and confirmation emails, you'll have my details. So your feedback is very welcome. And something that is not on the screen, just look out for a poll in a few minutes time. As Melanie gets started, we'll launch a poll just to get to know our audience a little bit better, so do look out for that. Okay, that's the scene set, so welcome Melanie, and it's over to you.
Thank you very much. So what I wanted to talk about today is the fact that those of us who are working in change management, we're trying to create new ways of working within the organisations that we are working for, and we need help. We need to get the people who have to work in new ways. We want to work with them. After all, what we probably are doing is facilitating and coordinating those efforts. But often one of the biggest sticking points is that we just don't have the resources working with us, because there is always that pullback to business as usual. So we keep hitting the same problem time and time again. We can have as many wonderful theories and models of how change should actually happen as we like. But if we don't actually have the involvement of those who are going to ultimately work differently in the business, then we've got a massive problem. And I think part of that, as we as a growing and relatively new profession, perhaps we need to put our story across in a slightly different way. So I want to look at some of the current challenges and problems that we have, because we're perhaps not getting that awareness across. Maybe we're not winning the argument of how valuable we are. I want to look in a particular way at the value that change management creates, a way that I think best connects with those whose authority and support we need. And I'm going to do that by looking through sort of a very simple life cycle of just how we get the awareness, how we get the participation, and then how we actually bed down a change to it becoming the new norm. So awareness, participation, and adoption. And then I'm going to talk about the next steps for how you might take forward some of the ideas that are coming up in this webinar. But as Mark said, could you just answer this poll question? Because I'd like to know if I'm talking to a group of project and program managers predominantly, or those who have a change role. They might be a change manager, transformation manager, change lead, or somebody who's working in the business, who might be working in any kind of operational role where actually they've got their day job, but you've joined us because you're quite interested in how perhaps you might make change actually happen in your organisation. So answer the poll, and then I can probably angle my comments to whoever I've got predominantly as the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And we've got most votes in actually. I put that up as soon as you mentioned the poll. So what are we looking at? 44% PPM, 46% change management, and then there's small number for the other two, 7% line management / operational, or 3 or 4% none of the above.
Well, welcome to the none of the above, and welcome to the very small group that's in the line management roles. I have a great deal of sympathy, and I hope that I'm going to be talking your language, and you can comment and pose questions to Mark if I'm not. So I've got about half and half then on project and change management. So let's get started about talking about our issues. And I think the first thing we have to recognise is that perhaps, as I've said before, we haven't won the argument yet. I don't think that we're getting across what change management is and specifically what benefits it can offer an organisation. And the lack of recognition, the lack of understanding affects us, I think, in four key areas. First of all, the purpose. And I think there's often a misunderstanding that perhaps change management is really about communication of the change taking place. So it's about, our job is to announce things, it's to make people aware. And I'm not sure that in all areas we've cracked it, that people recognise that these communications have a much wider purpose than pure awareness. That we need to explain that through our communications, our purpose is actually to influence, to motivate, and to persuade people that they want to have a go and they want to start working in new ways. So actually what we're doing with our purpose is we are there to reduce the risk and reduce the risk of disruption. We're not just there to let people know something. We are not strictly a communications function. It is a part of what we do. Communications are core to some of our activities, but it's not the main thing that we're there for. That's not our main purpose. We are here to help ensure that the risk that project deliverables, which we've invested in, are actually going to go into use. It's no good going off shopping and buying something new and shiny and then just putting it in the cupboard and forgetting about it because nobody's actually done any of the sort of preparation to work out how to use it and how it's going to fit into achieving their objectives. So we're there to reduce the risk that we're not going to get the return on investment that was promised in the business case. We're also there to manage the risk of disruption, the risk that perhaps staff think, this all seems a little unsettling. I'm not sure about any of this, and the risk, therefore, that they take a choice fairly early on in the life of the change, that perhaps they would be better off working for another organisation rather than getting involved in this change. So we lose valuable people. It is often the valuable people who will jump first. And then, of course, there's the risk that staff are finding everything we're doing with the change so disruptive and so stressful that they sort of become overwhelmed. They withdraw their enthusiasm, they withdraw their volunteerism. And so immediately we have lower productivity and higher stress, which leads to lower productivity. So I think we have a purpose that is much wider than just notifying people of what change is about. I think a failure to understand the value of change management and the advantages and the solutions that we offer means that from a timing perspective, we can often be called in far too late, and that sometimes within an initiative, a project, or a program, we're called in to sort of help explain that we're about to go live. And I've got lots of examples of this where, of course, it's too late to fully engage those impacted. And of course, when you tell somebody that they've got to start working in a new way, there's no opportunity there to give them the time to discover what the benefits, what the impact is going to be and how disruptive. There's no real chance to give them an opportunity to practice and to make sense of it before they're expected to use it. And so as far as the timing is concerned, there's very little we can achieve when we're simply called in too late. We miss the opportunity for influencing, motivating and persuading people towards a new way of working. So if we can establish how valuable we are, particularly, I think, to those of you on the call who are from the project management community, and I include my project managers, program managers, those from the portfolio office and portfolio managers, if we can ensure that you're clear that how useful we can be, I think we can end up with a sort of an integrated project and change management plan that brings the change management activities much earlier into the project life cycle. I think that also leads us into this query about not just purpose, timing, and resource. That there's work to be done, and of course, if we don't really win the argument about appreciating just how much work there is to be done, then it doesn't get resourced properly. There's no dedicated resource. Whereas I know that with organisations who are very good at change, what we're seeing is that they are appointing, it might not be full time, but certainly somebody somewhere is responsible for the change management actions. That the more holistic approach of helping staff move from the old ways to the new ways of working, it is under the direction of, well, whatever job title it might be, some kind of, sort of professional change lead. It could be a transformation lead, transformation manager, change agent, you name it. I don't think we've got the nomenclature right on change management yet at all. But also, it's not just having that professional lead, but actually effort is made within the business to say, actually, staff are expected to spend some of their time leading themselves and their colleagues through change, as well as doing the day job, and maybe reorganising the day job to free up that capacity. So organisations who are very good at change management have a well worked out system of setting up a network of change agents that leads change through to everybody who's got to work differently. But again, if we haven't won the argument, then why would anybody want to hand over resources for something that they don't understand or don't appreciate the value of? And lastly, why do we exist? Is the outcome, is it that we are accepting our getting people to just accept what the deliverables are, or are we actually much closer to perhaps there's a job here to realise the benefits? And of course, the whole outcome that we're sort of supposed to create is not just that things have been implemented, but actually that they've been fully adopted as new ways of working, and that there are new habits and new norms that as a result are cutting costs, making things more efficient, increasing customer satisfaction, and therefore we are genuinely realizing the benefits that are quoted in the original business case. So that's really the outcome that we should be going for. So I think too often we're working on the left-hand side of this slide, and that there are these assumptions. And I think it's about how we challenge these assumptions, how we put across our story of the value of change management that can help us move much further towards the right-hand side. So I would move my slide on if it would let me. Absolutely doesn't. Hang on a sec, guys. Okay, my screen has frozen for no apparent reason. So I'm going to talk about how do we establish the value of change management. I'll let my laptop have a bit of a rest. I don't know why it gets to rest when I never do, but let's have a rest. So I think what we've got to do is connect with our audience. We've got to talk about the value, not what we do. And I think one of our most common issues is that we tend to sort of talk about all the things we're doing and how busy we are and all the activities. But if you're not from our world, why would that be of interest? Actually, let's cut to the chase and say, as a result of us being really busy, these are the sorts of things that are actually going to make a difference. We're actually useful, we're valuable, because as a result of what we do, this is what we achieve. So I'm going to give it one more chance now. Mark, I'm not sure I've got control of the screen then. So we want to talk about value, right? We want to talk about value across the early steps of the change management life cycle, when the change is actually taking place, and when the change is becoming the new norm. So we're going to look at these three phases as the structure of our webinar today. And of course, in that awareness piece, we've got people who are angry and upset about having to change. In participation, what we're trying to achieve is that people don't feel convinced by the new way of working, and they're not sure it's going to offer them any benefits, but at least we've got them to a point where they go, okay, I'll try it out, I'll give it a go. And then, of course, what we want to end up with is that acceptance of the new way that is no longer a change, it's the new norm. So this is a very simple life cycle, but I want to get to a point where I'm not talking about what we do. So as I've said, I've heard people explain change management to their colleagues, and we end up talking about we use our language to do so. And so we end up talking about things like, oh, we're doing an impact assessment, and we're talking about a transition curve, a readiness assessment. And so, of course, we use our own terminology, we use our own language, which excludes others. If they don't happen to be an expert in the management of change, they're going, not really unsure what that is. So we're going to focus on the results. And I think I stepped back after having written this webinar and thought, well, how do I do that? And actually, it was obvious to me that what I think I'm trying to do is when I talk about the impact, I'm concentrating my comments in two ways, really, and I hope I'm about to illustrate these for you. I'm either reducing the negativity surrounding the change, and by doing that, I'm reducing the cost of actually making it happen, or I'm increasing the positivity that people feel, and therefore I'm increasing the return on investment, the revenue that we can achieve, because by increasing the positivity, I'm increasing the enthusiasm, I'm increasing the participation that people are involved in the change, and that means often that the change goes certainly more smoothly, but also it probably goes quicker. So we start to see the benefits of what we've changed much earlier than we might otherwise have done. So when I want to talk about business value, which really is the key thing, I want to focus on these two areas. Either one of those will give me something useful. So over time, what I'm trying to do is reduce that negativity, increase that positivity. And now I'm going to take you through some of the value. And you're going to see the key thing to watch out for is that I am not talking about the things I'm doing. I'm not giving you a breakdown of all of the activities involved in change management. I've jumped ahead and I'm actually saying, and this is what you, the business, whoever that is going to get out of what it is that I'm doing. And I think that what I've noticed is that where I get the greatest engagement, the greatest support in organisations is when I am talking the language of business to those who actually are going to be providing me with the resources I need. Here's the example. So the business value of awareness. So in awareness, what is it that I've got to do? I've got to make this communication. I know that I've got to make people aware that there is a change coming. I've got to explain what the scope of that change is. It'll be really helpful if I also explained all the things that would remain the same so that people felt relatively calm about exactly what was happening. And I want to make sure that I'm authentic. I don't sweep things under the carpet. So I'm honest. If they're going to experience loss, they're going to lose functionality. If they're going to lose certainty over the building they're working in or who they're working with, I'm very honest about those. I'm not going to wallow in the negativity, but I'm certainly not going to hide it, because nobody will trust me ever again if I don't become honest. I'm going to thank them for all their efforts so far, but I'm really going to concentrate on this is what we need to change, this is why we need to change, and I'm going to ask questions about what does it mean to you. And in doing that, the earlier I can get out there and get these communications done, the earlier I can make sure that rumours are not starting to spread. We all know that when there's silence, but we know that there's a bit of change afoot, we all start talking about it. The grapevine or the gossiping that we do is never positive. We never look at something and go, oh, this could be full of opportunities. In the absence of communication, we have a tendency to catastrophize and think that things are going to be much worse than perhaps they might end up. Now, what's interesting from a business point of view is how much that costs the business. Because what I'm going to have to do first of all is I'm going to have to get out there with lots of very positive messages. I'm going to have to sell the benefits of the change. And of course, if people are already feeling on a bit of a downer about something, I'm going to have to work even harder to get them back to a neutral position before I can even move them into being enthused about something. So the costs of actually refuting negative rumours can be huge. If you think of it in terms of not as an internal task for a moment, but if you stepped away and thought, I'm going to have to hire a PR agency, or I'm going to have to run television advertising to actually sort of get my message out there. Think how much that costs, because that's really what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to do an internal advertising campaign. So I want to get my information out there as early as possible, because the real value is that I save the business the actual cost in terms of effort of refuting those rumours. But I think there's something else as well, which is that when people are sort of nervous and think that there's negativity about, then what happens is that that's where they spend their time. That's what they're talking about. So it's not just the cost of refuting the rumours, but it's the productivity we've lost while people were creating the rumours. I was at Gatwick the other day, and I was walking through the one of the shopping areas, and clearly there was something going on with the staff. Uh, they were being asked to work in a new way. I could hear that. And there was a lady who was taking my purchases and sort of sorting me out and taking my money, but her thoughts really weren't on the job. So I wouldn't say I was getting a great deal of customer service. But there were 3 other colleagues who were standing behind her, and they were all talking, and they were all very angry about this proposed change. So we had 3 people who weren't doing their job at all, plus this lady who was doing half of her job, while I was sort of standing there listening in about the difficulties they were facing and how much they didn't like their manager and how awful it was to work there. And I was thinking, oh, good grief. And you can see that happens all the time to all of us. This is normal. This is a normal situation, and it costs the business hugely. So as change managers, do you know what? We help save all that negative cost. Also, I'm inspired by the world of positive psychology. And when we create positivity, when people feel that actually something is possible, that it's achievable, that it's exciting to be a part of it, when we create that positive sort of go-getting feeling in their minds, we know from lots of neuroscientific studies that that actually increases 2 things: their ability to be creative, their ability to take in new information, and actually, in fact, to remain open to new information, and to work out new ideas. So they become creative and innovative, but also it increases their resilience, their grit, their determination, if you like, that they've got more sticking power if they feel positive than if they feel negative. I mean, that I think is fairly commonsensical. You know as well as I do that when people are feeling grumpy and in a bad mood, they are much more likely to give up on something that's difficult and go, oh, this doesn't work, and go off in a huff, than if they're feeling quite good about it and quite positive, then they'll put a bit more effort in. I think one of the other things that we can do very early on in the life cycle is not just say, hey, this is what's going to be changing, but put in front of people a plan, a suggested sort of roadmap of how that change is going to come to pass. Because what's happening when we do that is we're meeting uncertainty of, I wonder what the change will really feel like, with at least some certainty of how it's going to be managed. And I think that does a couple of things. It sends a very clear message that the extra effort we're asking people to apply, the sort of volunteerism, that the effort that we want them to get involved in the change will not be wasted. It is going to be clearly directed, so that there's worth getting involved, because you're not going to have your time wasted or disrespected. And I think also by doing that, it creates another kind of certainty, which is a feeling of, okay, I kind of understand what's going to be happening to me. Because when, as a human, we feel uncertain, we go out and find our own certainty. And one of the ways that staff can do that is say, I don't really understand what's going on in my organisation. It feels really uncertain at the moment. So what they do is they go and apply for jobs elsewhere, because that is a very swift way of creating certainty for themselves. Because they're, right, I'm applying self-choice here. I'm going to go out and get myself a new job where I know where I'll be working and know what I'll be doing. So it's that if you create uncertainty, how can you minimize that? By meeting it with some kind of certainty. I think also that what we're doing, the key activities that we as change professionals, when we're communicating change towards the beginning of the life cycle, do is make people feel respected. Because if we keep people well informed, they believe that their contribution is being acknowledged and respected, and by doing that we increase their engagement. When people feel disrespected, when they feel devalued, that's when we start to see absenteeism climbing through sickness and just basically staying at home going, oh, I don't want to go in today. So we can increase the actual capacity of the organization, and we can increase productivity by doing our jobs. So there's real value there. I think the other thing is that what I'm trying to achieve in the awareness, and if I just go back to the model for a moment, what I'm trying to look at is that if I can move people from awareness and actually get them on board, I'm going to get them into, oops, what happened there? Sorry, guys. I'm going to get them into participation. They're going to become a sort of an army of volunteers. And the sooner I can make that transition from awareness to participation, the sooner I get some key business value. And the key business value I'm looking for, wish I'd never moved slides now, is that people can sort of get involved. And by getting involved, they're starting to make those decisions about the effort they're going to put in, and that gets me to participation. I've got people who are going to start creating early examples of the change. So I'm really keen to make sure that by giving people information, they feel well informed, they can self-direct their effort. And you can hear from that that's about people having their own power, autonomy, which we know is a key part of people feeling motivated. And lastly, by getting the information out there and providing as much sort of encouragement as possible, people feel that actually there is no them and us. There's not the well-informed sort of project team who seem to know everything that's going on, and then the business who are the recipients who don't really understand what's going to be happening. Actually, we've got rid of that them and us culture, and actually we're all in it together because we've got that shared understanding, and there's no hidden information. I mean, there's a phrase, information is power. These phrases come up because actually there's a kernel of truth in them, and that the people who know stuff have more power than the ones who don't. So let's level the playing field as early as possible in the life cycle of change if we want people to actually really commit and really get involved. So I think we make a difference. Now, I brainstormed some of these key points. You would need to make these perhaps relevant to your own organisation, use language that's relevant. And I'm sure you could use this as a jumping off point to come up with loads of your own ideas. But the point is that each one of these is about what we've achieved as a result of our work, not describing what we're actually doing, not describing every step of our work. The same holds true for participation, in that what do I do as a change manager? I coordinate and I facilitate the involvement of people in the business who are going to be affected by project deliverables. I want them to see as early as possible, maybe what the new platform is that they're going to be using, or talk about what the new regulations are that they're going to have to work around, or perhaps explain the restructuring of the organization and explain what teams they'll now be working in. But as soon as possible, I want them to get involved in designing how they are going to do their jobs from now on, who they're going to do their jobs with, what inputs, what outputs they're going to create. And one of the things that I think happens is if I can mobilize this army of people who are genuinely impacted by the change, then we can reduce wasted effort, because we're not talking about those who perhaps are on the project side who are trying to make the thing work that people use. We're actually thinking about how are we going to get the thing actually into use. So that second point there is that I'm creating a far better balance between the emphasis being on the features and functions, often in system related change, and instead widening out what people are preparing. Is they're preparing to work out what the new relationships are, how information flows, what's the streamlined process that underpins what we're doing. So I think we get that better balance between features and functions. And I think it's the people who are affected and are going to be asked to work in new ways are the ones that are doing it. So there's a reduced effort in that we're not wasting effort by people who aren't working in a new way being the ones to hypothesize about how things should work. No, we'll cut straight to the chase and let's involve the people who are affected. And we can do that if we can get their enthusiasm and motivation to take part. I think also one of the benefits that we're offering the business is that we are, through the change, providing the conditions for personal growth, personal development, the stretch goals, stretch objectives. We're offering people the challenge of something new, which they can find very inspiring, which keeps them fresh at work, which keeps them more interested. And therefore, what we see is that perhaps they don't want to leave the organisation, and that they're feeling that they're getting challenged every day, and it's a great place to work. So we can actually see that perhaps engagement scores might go up, and often staff engagement surveys are something that many executives are held to account over. So it's always interesting. The thing about having our army of motivated people is that they start having a go at working in the new way. So they start working on pilots and prototypes. And what we get from that is an early validation of what we think we're actually changing. I mean, so many changes that we conceive of hypothetically, actually, when we start to put them into practice, always have different results to what we first anticipated. So the earlier we can go into live use, however small scale, the sooner we can validate if we're on the right lines. But also those early prototypes, those early pilots, actually act as the most important motivator of all, because they provide real evidence of the new capability. And they provide real evidence that this is workable. Because look, that team over there have used it, and they're having a good experience. So of course, we can use that to infuse those who aren't yet on board with what we're trying to achieve. We also reduce the time where people are sort of spent looking for their own escape routes. Again, throughout the life cycle of change, we should always be alert to the fact that if people are struggling, they're going to spend effort and time looking for a way out, applying for other jobs internally or externally. So we want to make sure that we increase the effort in the change and reduce the effort that they put into looking for those escape routes. I think also the earlier the involvement, the quicker we get to the tipping point where actually there's more people working in the new way than not. So we get to that tipping point if that's becoming the new norm. The earlier we can get there, the less disruptive life really is. Because the longer the disruption goes on, the harder it is to keep people motivated and maintain momentum. Because we're engaging with people, we're putting in front of them lots of opportunities for ways they can practice and participate and have a bit of a go at the change. The sooner we do that, of course, then they're feeling, I understand it, I get it. So that reduces the uncertainty, which reduces stress and conflict. And what's really interesting is how that improves the sort of the quality of engagement that people have with their colleagues and with customers and suppliers. So we can actually be a force for reducing negativity in the business, a negativity that leaks out to our external partners and to our external customers. And that often leads to complaints, and complaints means that we actually have to think.
We seem to have lost Mel, folks. Bear with us. Bear with us 2 moments.
Hello.
A moment. Oh, you're back. Good.
I'm back. I don't know where you all went, but I carried on. So I was saying, one of the things is if we can get some people mobilised as soon as possible, we get them trained up in the new ways of working, then they start working in the right new way. It minimises the number of mistakes that they might make. That minimises the amount of rework that we might have to put right during the time when we're making change happen. So you can see we come back all the time to, as a result of change management activities, we can make the journey of change much smoother for the business so that we stop rework, we keep people focused on the job in hand, they stop looking for escape routes, they're feeling more positive, so they're more creative, they're able to come up with more ideas, they are getting those conditions for personal growth and development. So we are actually a force for good I've talked about this before on some papers where I've talked about how we can align change management these days. One of the values that I want to talk about is how change management, in its capacity to reduce uncertainty, to reduce stress and to reduce conflict, is part of a mental well-being of all of our staff. So to say that change management activities are not important is to say that looking after our staff is not important. And I think in some cases I've had discussions with senior executives who have then seen what I do in a very different light. And for that reason, because that's an area of the business they're very worried about, therefore they're going to give me their support and realise that actually I can be useful, and that the work I do isn't just that touchy-feely soft stuff that actually seems to take forever and we have to pay a lot for it. They can actually see the value, and that's what I'm trying to get to. Last but not least, before we start to turn to how to do it and to get your questions, once we're coming up the other side and we're really bedding the change down now as becoming the new norm, of course, the obvious thing is that we achieve the benefits from having made that change. We achieve the benefits of perhaps revenue increase, cost reduction, regulatory compliance, staff engagement, and customer satisfaction. I mean, if you look at those 5 buckets, you're never very far away from one or other of the benefits you're going to be claiming. But of course, there's also the additional benefits from dismantling old ways of working. We stop paying for stuff that we no longer need. We can dismantle it might be software licenses, or we can stop holding meetings that we no longer need to hold and soaking up people's time. So there's usually an additional set of benefits around what we're dismantling. But I think also, if we can get to that point where we've achieved the change, what we've got is we've got our own advertising agency now, because all of those that are now working in the new way, they can speak positively about their experiences. So, and they can advertise the benefits of the shift they've made, which in a world of constant high volume change can only be good, because by creating the impression that the shift to this new way of working hasn't killed us and it's been fine, it went better than I thought it did, and all those positive things, actually encourages people to think, okay, well, when the next round of change comes, I don't need to maybe look at it quite so cynically. So we're back to the value we created at the awareness stage, in that I would have to refute less negative rumours potentially, and it will be easier for me to create positivity the next time around. Again, one of the things is, the sooner we get to change becoming the new norm, the time spent discussing the possibilities of what that change might actually be, of course, disappears, because it's a reality now. So of course we can get back to focusing on our business objectives, our day-to-day job, if you like. And of course, there's all of the benefits around the esteem needs being met. We're creating a sense of achievement that creates a sense of optimism. And again, this means that we are creating a feeling that maybe getting involved in the next change won't be too bad. So we're reducing that cynicism, and therefore we're reducing the amount of time and effort on negative rumours the next time around. And we've created ourselves a baseline from which, of course, more innovation and more improvements can flow. So we've put ourselves into a very good position. So this is all the business value of what it is that we're doing. How do you achieve it? How do you turn away from saying what it is you're going to do to how do you get the conversation to be just a slightly different perspective? We're looking at what we do from a slightly different lens, which is, what's the outcome? And I was trying to think, well, how do I do it? And it's not a straightforward. It doesn't come straight out of my mouth as, hey, this is the amazing thing I do for you. What I have to do is work through an example of what it is I'm doing. So I always tend to start with the activities, but I have to keep asking myself these questions, like, as a result of doing that, what happens? You know, the outcome, if I do this thing, what have I created? What difference have I made? And why is that positive? So what you're always asking yourself is how to do it. Probably the best way I can do it is to look at an example. I can take any one of the benefits that we've just had a look at, and let's just pick one straight off the top of my head. I'll go back to creating the awareness, and let's look at negative rumours. So what we're doing first of all is I'm getting out there as early as possible with the information. So I'm saying, look, this is what we are planning to change. And by the way, these are all the things that we're planning to keep the same. So immediately I'm trying to get out there with as honest an impression of the scope as I possibly can. So I'm going to do lots of, we might do a big email announcement across all the organisation. I might do some town hall meetings with senior executives, but we're getting that information out there. So everybody has accurate information, so there is no misunderstandings. So what's the value of that? If there's no misunderstandings, I don't have to correct misunderstandings. If I don't have to correct misunderstandings, I can redirect our efforts to actually asking questions about practically how we're going to make that happen. If I don't have to correct misunderstandings, I haven't got people feeling unhappy about the change, starting to moan about the change, creating that negativity that brings everybody down. If I haven't got that sort of negativity, I've got positive people. If I've got positive people, they're more likely to be creative. They're more likely to be open to new information and change. They're able to be more helpful in creating the new ways of working, and therefore we're going to create the new ways of working faster. So I'm probably going to shorten the life cycle of the change. So you see the game I'm playing all the time is I take the one good thing that I think I'm doing and then go, and why is that good? What would that lead to? So you just keep playing this game all the time with yourself. Don't expect yourself to be able to say straight off the bat, the upside of what I'm doing for you is X. I think a lot of the time I have to work through behind the scenes. Well, if I do this, this good thing happens. And if that good thing happens, then that leads to that good thing. And then that good thing leads to that good thing. And you can actually mind map these. Then you'd have trails of all of these sort of benefits. Because of course, one of the other things I wanted to say is that I've looked at this from the value throughout the life cycle of the change. The other way that you can cut it, of course, is that you can look at the value of change management depending on who your audience member is. As I gave you the example, I had an operations director who is quite concerned about managing stress. HR in his organisation are also concerned about managing stress and how if they don't, they're seen as a bad employer. They're also more likely to be subject to tribunals as
We seem to have lost you again, Mel.
I'm still here. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back. You just dropped
Excellent.
momentarily.
Okay. What I was saying is that if I want to talk to that operations manager, I'll talk about the value, the mental health benefits of change management. I'll talk about the value in reducing stress. But equally, if I'm talking to the finance director, there's a very good chance that what I want to talk about is the fact that I can reduce the costs of managing this change because I don't have to put a lot of activity and effort. I don't have to commission videos. I don't have to do lots of newsletters about the positive benefits of the change because I haven't got lots of negative rumours to refute. If I'm talking to the chief risk officer, I might well be talking about how we can reduce the risks of disgruntled staff who might sabotage areas of the business. I might talk about reducing the risk that we won't realise the benefits. That would also be a story, I think, for the finance director. But you see what I mean is all of this value can be cut a different way. It can be cut according to who your audience is. So there's lots of ideas in here that would affect, would really sort of connect with different roles. So it might not be that you want to worry too much about the value by the life cycle of change. You might want to take all of these examples from this webinar and say some of these would best hit some of my key stakeholders. So if you are going to play the game of where are all the benefits, oops, there we go. As a result of what I do, the value is this. Maybe walk in the shoes of some of your key stakeholders and go, I wonder what story they want to hear. But the point I'm making with this webinar is that I think the story they don't want to hear, or certainly not to start with, is all the things we're going to do and how we're going to do all of those things. Because if you like, that's activities and that's not the outcome. And I think what people are incentivized by is the positive outcome. So let's just sharpen up how we talk about change management and actually dive straight into this is the positive outcome that we create. I'm sure you've got lots of questions, and I'm going to let Mark sort of pull them all together. But hopefully that's making sense. It's becoming probably one of the most important things that I do is actually really tailoring back to business value and not activities. What I found is business value first. That generates a sympathy and an interest in what I'm about, and then that opens the door for me to be able to describe in more detail what exactly it is that I do. But I've got to get the arguments the right way round, and it's convince people of the value first, not tell them what we do.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Mel. And I'm glad you finished on that point actually, because it chimes really well with it's more of a comment that Jenny's made online. Completely agree on the importance of outcomes. This is most important word around me now at work. Because the work we do in an IT department now needs to be described in terms of business outcomes, stopping us from just doing stuff that doesn't directly contribute.
Yeah, and I think it is hard because as human beings, what we have a tendency to do is we're really, really good at activities. We write ourselves a to-do list, don't we? We've got to do this, then this, then this. But we don't automatically, I think in terms of, and the result is X. We don't jump straight to the result. So I think I think one of the key techniques is to maybe think about all the things you're going to do, but keep asking yourself this slide. But as a result of that, what happens? What's the conclusion? What happens at the end of that? What do we get out of doing it? What's the upside? There's all sorts of questions you can ask in your mind. But if you write out all the things you're going to do, you go, and who would care? What difference would this make? And that's maybe the conclusion of all the sort of the analysis you do. You're basically, what we're saying is share the conclusions, don't share all your workings out. It's like going back to A-level maths. Give them the answer, don't show them how you worked out the answer.
Okay, and Dennis asks, having a professional change leader can sometimes create a feeling amongst senior management that change is now the responsibility of that person only, whereas obviously they're just they're there to be the catalyst for change, I suspect. How do you cope with that type of misrepresentation at top management?
I think that's absolutely right. I think there can be a great misunderstanding that as soon as you appoint a role for anything, it must be their problem then, because that's in their job title. And again, we're just being very human. And I think it is a case of my way of handling it is that I will go around the organisation. And I was only doing this the other day, actually. I went around each of the board members and I sort of said, well, how can I help you achieve what you've got to do? So I put myself in the position of I'm here to work alongside you, not work for you. That was number one. And number two, I sort of kept asking questions about, well, how will this change affect your area? What are your real concerns? How do you think you can mitigate those concerns? Who do you work with in your business line that will probably be best able to sort that out? Because obviously they are the subject matter experts. So I kept coming back in very subtle ways to saying, you know, I'm going to be the great coordinator and facilitator for you, but I'm never going to set myself up as a business expert. And do you really want somebody who is not an expert in your line of business actually doing all the change to you? You know, so I think it's about how we get into those early conversations. And my basic mantra is always ask, don't tell. So I'm going to ask about how are they going to be doing it, which really sets I think the conversation at the right place from very early on.
And Matt's question is around the sort of the roles between project manager and change manager. So would you say the project manager delivers the, for example, software, and the change manager focuses on the training, implementation and benefits realization?
Yes, I would, but I caveat that by saying they are roles, not necessarily people, because I know in some organisations that there is an expectation, which sometimes angers people, that the project manager is going to do both, and that brings us into lots of arguments about, well, how long is the project life cycle then if we're going to be doing all the behavioural change stuff as well? I'd also, I'm always a little bit hesitant because I'm saying I think there are people that need to focus on the creation of new ways of working, which is working out how we will behave now that we have this new feature, function, platform, app, or whatever. And there are those that definitely create it. But the reason I'm hesitant is that it might not be a formal change manager role. It might be line managers and supervisors in the area of the business that are being changed who are going to be doing those roles, but they won't ever take on the title of change manager or change lead, because they're already, you know, maybe the head of the call center or the call center manager or the daytime shift supervisor. They've already got their job titles. But I do think Matt's absolutely right that there are two categories of work. But I also think that they need to be aligned, and that where we've got the technical creation of something, as it's being created, so we go through the research, the design, the development, the testing, and then we've created something. Either agile or waterfall methods of project management lead to delivery. As we are going through the delivery life cycle, we should also be pairing that with questions about, well, how will it be used, and are the people that have got to use it actually mobilizing to think through what their process will be, what templates or reports or communications with customers need to be. So I think it's just making sure that there's that the two pieces of work align, whoever ends up doing them.
Great, thanks, Mel. Next question is from a change manager of a large IT transformation project. My feeling is that I'm the policeman of the project to ensure we identify and minimise the user impact from the transformation. Do you have any suggestions to engage colleagues from the project side to start thinking more from a change management perspective?
Well, I did an exercise this morning. I don't know if this will help, but it was a KSA chart, which basically said it listed all the tasks that the business would now have to do, and it sort of got people thinking, well, what knowledge, what information do they need to do those tasks? What skills do they need to do those tasks? And what attitudes they need to do those tasks? It's a brilliant little workshop activity for those in the business to really map out how they are going to be working differently. But by involving a couple of people from the technical side, from the project creation side, that delivery side, it was really interesting to see how they were starting to appreciate how their work in practice would actually be used, and the pressures that those in the business are actually under. Because those in the business didn't just talk about the tasks they have to do, but they talked about the KPIs to which they are held accountable. And it got a conversation going about, for example, on this particular system that's being created, about drop-down menus. And as the project guys could see how much these guys are measured every second of the day, they realize that when they're doing like a drop down menu for countries, if, because this group happened to be based in the United Kingdom, they don't put United Kingdom perhaps at the top and then all the other countries in case you have got a different country. If you don't help them do that, then they've got to scroll through every single country, and they click, and they're hoping for United Kingdom, but they sometimes click on United Arab Emirates because it's kind of close to that, you know, and so they make a little bit of a mistake, and then they've got to go back and correct it. And the project guys, it really came to life for them. They had an absolute moment of discovery in that as these business people were trying to create their new world, they could see how technical decisions they take can make things worse or better. And to take that information back into their project teams and go, when we're making design decisions and we're trying to get the technically correct answer, let's not forget the usability. I don't know if that helps, but I thought it was amazing to watch, and it was really gratifying that actually we had some shared understanding in the room.
Oh, thanks, Phil. There's a couple of questions on using metrics to measure some of these things. So we're talking about conveying value and measuring adoption and sustaining. Is there anything available metrics-wise to measure success?
I think this is a piece of work. I've just gone back to the business value of adoption. I think this is a piece of work that is, I mean, certainly a big piece of work that I have to do on every single assignment. I start with the idea of, well, how on earth are we going to measure these things? And as somebody said to me last week from the business, he was really concerned because a lot of this is subjective. And I sort of thought, yeah, I totally get that. For example, if I just go back to the awareness one and we talk about the cost of refuting negative rumours, well, you have to start with the fact that actually what we're trying to measure perhaps is how many negative comments we are getting, how many criticisms, and how much maybe even how much apathy there is. And perhaps how do we work that out? If we're working with a small team within a business that's being affected and we can see them every day, we can probably measure that quite easily. But if we've got 100,000 staff that are out across 15 different locations around the world, which is an organisation I'm working with at the moment, then that's kind of a big issue. There are no easy answers to the measures piece, but one thing I would say is that you have to ask yourself, well, let's keep the measure as simple as possible. Are there things that we already measure? Are there things that we can track? For example, if you already do a staff engagement survey, it might only be annually. That probably isn't going to take you where you need to go for checking on how people are feeling about the change. But what you can do is you can put in place a facility for people to pose you questions really easily, and you can track the level of positive versus negative questions that you're getting, and seeing whether or not you're having an impact on reducing the negativity and the sort of the implied criticisms that people are flinging at you, versus the questions you're getting where people are asking for information as they're getting ready to take part because they're feeling quite positive about it. It's an incredibly complicated subject, and it is relevant only to the change that you are making. There are no books off the shelf where you can pick these measures up, but it also brings you sharply into focus of you need to work with whoever your colleagues are in the business that are responsible for benefits realization, benefits measurement. I'm not a statistician, so I often go into the finance function and I say, look, I know these look like subjective measures, but is there anything that we're currently measuring? What data do we collect here? Is there any ideas you can come up with? And I'm always really positively surprised that they can come up with things that help me track stuff. So, but it's going to be subjective and it's going to be hard work.
Great, thanks, Matt. I think we'll take two more questions. So let's go for, at the beginning, you mentioned developing an organisation which was able to bring together groups of colleagues as change agents. How do you go about doing this?
I think there's I'll send out a paper on change agents after this on my LinkedIn account. But I think one of the things you're looking for is for people within the business who are going to be asked to work in new ways. What you're trying to do is you're trying to set up a network of those people that are really interested, because not everybody is. They're really interested. They're really upbeat about the change. They understand how their area of the business works. So they've got a couple of things about them. They've got that subject matter expertise and that feeling that change is a good thing. And what you're looking for is for those people to form together as a network who can encourage their colleagues beneath them. So it's very much like a Ponzi scheme. You get a few people and then you ask them to think about people in their network that they want to encourage, and you ask those people to think about the people in their network they want to encourage. So you are building a sort of cascade model, if you like. But the one key thing about that is they have to volunteer to do it. If you're appointing them to do it, then probably it's just another task that they don't want to do.
Great, thanks, Phil. And this is I suspect this one might be almost impossible to answer, but I think it's a good one to finish on.
Excellent.
If you could describe the role of a change manager in one word, what word would you use, and what two words would you use to describe who we work for?
Okay, cheerleader, because I think that covers the influencing, motivating, and persuading. And who do I work for? I work for the business that has to work differently. I work for all the people. I might not be appointed by them and I might not be paid by them, but I work for the people who have got to abandon their comfortable routines, their old ways of working that they know how to do, and I've got to take on all the risk and uncertainty of trying out something new, practicing it, and putting all that effort in. They are really my audience, and those are the people that I am trying to service.
Nicely done. Thanks, Phil. Okay, so I think we can start wrapping up there as we've hit our hour. Yeah, thanks for cycling forward a few slides. We'll leave that on display as we wrap up. Just a reminder as well, I said at the start, but I know we occasionally have a few people joining late. We have recorded the session, and I'll be working on getting the recording and slides online soon afterwards, so look out for our follow-up email that will contain links so you can access the slides and recording. And Melanie's also put together a supporting paper for this subject as well, so I'll make sure that's included. And yeah, that's about it, I think. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope it's been useful for you, and thanks very much, Mel, for your insights and expertise as ever. Very much appreciated. Yeah, check out the links there, and there's also a few relevant qualifications to take a look at. The most obvious one being change management. But do you want to say a sentence or two about Agile Change Agent as well, because we should actually change that to now available rather than coming soon.
It is now available because it's been running for the last few months, and I have never had such a positive response to a new qualification. So many organisations are asking for it. It's a couple of days. It's all practical. It's about how do I run all the change activities alongside an agile project, and it's going down a storm. We're into the 3 figures now, so we've gone in terms of the hundreds of people that are being trained in it. So it's really great, and I'm really pleased.
Awesome. Thanks, Mel. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks for joining, and we hope to see you on future webinars. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.